Okay, I got. Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. I guess I'll just keep it in this view because I think yesterday or on Monday they were having issues with the slideshow.
Okay.
So my name is Rick Lynch. This is my first semester in the program, and our group did a wind energy system design and analysis focused around the Williston, North Dakota area. So for background, right, North Dakota, it has the fourth lowest population of any state in the US, but it actually has the second highest per capita energy consumption. And all of that is primarily related to all of the industrial loads related to oil and gas processing, collection and refining and transport, because that area has the Bakken oil formation, which is the US's largest oil formation, and so there's a lot of industrial loads out there. And then in addition to that, it's also becoming a growing center for data mining, so like cryptocurrency mining and things like that. And there was a study that was published estimating between a 4,600 and a 7,500 gigawatt hour gross load by 2038. And all of those uh, industrial loads are primarily centered around the Williston, North Dakota area. So as we mentioned, right, there's growing industrial loads around that area, primarily related to the cryptocurrency mining and the data mining and the data centers, and then um, primarily the Bakken oil formation and all of the industrial loads related to that. And the primary issue with all this load growth is that it's transmission constrained. So there's in that area, there's a lack of actual generation production um, to match with all of this load. All right, so this is a map, a transmission map of that area. So you can see Williston is on the left. Those purple lines are transmission lines, and you can see that there's no or almost no generation in that area. It all has to get carried kind of east to west from this pocket on the bottom right, which is mostly all coal generation. There's about 5,000 megawatts of generation in this area. And there are a lot of federal and financial incentives right now to kind of phase coal out. And I think that a quarter of coal resources are trying to be retired by 2029. So North Dakota and Williston specifically, right? That area has an excellent wind resource potential, right? It's kind of in the central east north area of the United States where there's a lot of wind and it's a little bit elevated, but it's all mostly flat. It's a remote and industrial area, right? So a lot of concerns for, say, building a large wind plant near an urban area aren't there. And then there have been studies done that show that there's a lot of area also in North Dakota, and especially around Williston, where building a site would have a low impact on biodiversity. And in 1991, NREL study actually estimated that there's 1.2 billion kilowatt hours of wind energy that could be harnessed by um, wind turbines. All right, so these are two different graphics from two different studies. The one on the left is just a wind resource map of North Dakota, right? Um, and you can see that around Williston, there's a lot of pink and purple, which shows a class 5 wind power. Um, and then on the right, everything colored shows areas where there's a 3 or 4 or 5 wind power class, and everything that's colored and that's not gray is an area um, where construction would have a low environmental impact on the wildlife, basically. All right, so for our wind power modeling, we looked at 10 different turbine models. Some of them are actually ones that are being used currently on wind farms in North Dakota. And then there's a handful of other ones that are not. And they all vary in rated power between 1500 and 4500 kilowatts, which we felt was a fairly representative range. Right, obviously there are smaller ones and there are larger ones, but for land-based wind farms, there's a fairly representative range of rated powers. And then they are all able to operate either stock or with additional upgrades up to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Right, obviously North Dakota has pretty harsh winters that can get extremely cold. And that's another big concern after like the 2021 winter storms when everything was freezing over. So for our studies, right, looking at the energy that could be produced by these turbine models, right, we ignored their hub heights for comparison because they're all within about 30 meters of each other. And then we didn't look at the temperatures of like temperature on air density. And then obviously we assumed that, right, the data that we found for power curves and for temperature was correct. We just modeled it for the turbine being on year round. And then for points on the power curve, it was just linear interpolation between those points when matching it up with our wind graph. All right, and then we assumed that the cost of a turbine for construction was about 1.3 million per rated megawatt. And that was just based on different sources that estimated between 1 and 2 million, usually closer to the 1 million range. So this is an example, right, of one of the power curves. This is for the GE 1.5 XLE, which was one of the smaller ones that we looked at, right? And then at the bottom is the hourly wind data that we got from Visual Crossing for the year 2023. So that goes from December 1st of 22 to November 31st of November, right? And then we were able to just use a Python script to match those up and then do our calculations to compare. All right, so this is just an example, a snippet out of the script, right? That shows, right, you get the wind speed and the power associated from the power curve, and then just interpolating between the points, right? Obviously, the highest power on the power curve is going to be the rated power, and you can get rated annual energy production from that. And so lining that up to the hourly wind speeds, right? We calculated available power, the average power generated, and then the rated annual energy that could be produced, and then the actual energy generated, and then the capacity factor, which was one of the primary parameters that we looked at, right, for our choice of wind turbine, assuming that, right, it was 1.3 million per rated megawatt for construction. Oops. And then this is how our turbines all compare to each other, right? So the 4.5 megawatt rated power, the Nordex N149 had a 72% capacity factor, and would be able to produce about 28,000 megawatt hours over the course of the year, assuming a 8,760 hour runtime. Here down on the right, this just shows a graph of capacity factor versus rated power, right? And the general trend was that the larger or the higher rated power a turbine had, the higher its capacity factor was, at least in this area, okay? And that can be due to it generally just being a larger and more robust turbine that had a higher cutout speed, so was able to operate in the higher wind speeds for more of the year. All right, and then these are just graphs comparing the annual, the rated energy in blue on the left, and then the actual annual energy is in orange. So you can compare, right, what the annual really versus the actual energy produced by each turbine model was, and then just the capacity factor on the right. So you can see that the two 4,500 kilowatt rated models had the highest capacity factor compared to the other ones. All right, so this the Nordex N149 had the highest capacity factor and also produced the most energy. And so assuming $1.3 million per rated megawatt, right, you would end up needing to build 263 of these turbines at a cost of about $1.5 billion just for the turbine construction cost. And then, right? Assuming a $45,000 per turbine per year cost of O&M, it would be about $12 million per year of ongoing maintenance during the lifetime of those turbines. And then compared to, right, say one of the smaller turbines that had a lower capacity factor, it would end up costing $1.81 billion to cover that 7,500 gigawatt hour load growth. And since there were so many more turbines, right, it would be about 4 times the O&M cost. Right, so just other findings, right, and all of these graphs coming up are for the GE 1500 kilowatt turbine, right? So you can see that in the, but so this is for the smallest turbine that we studied, but right, every turbine had pretty much an identical shaped power curve. Just some of them went further to the right since they had higher cutout speeds. But you can see, so this is January, which was the lowest wind months, and you can see that, right, even in the lowest wind months of the year, right, it's producing power pretty much all of the time. With really the limiting factor being when it's going above its cutout speed, right? And then obviously there are some times when there's when it's below the cutout speed. And then March 2023, this is the highest wind time of the year with the highest wind speeds, right? So in the orange, that is the cutoff speed for the small turbine that has a cutoff speed of 20, right? And then 25 would be the cutoff speed of one of our larger turbines. But you can see that, right, when the turbine is operating, it's pretty much always at rated power. And right, its limiting factor is just when wind speed is too high and it has to cut off to protect itself. Right, so comparing the smallest turbine to the largest turbine, right, you can see that because of its higher cutoff speed, it has about 1,200 more hours of the year that it can operate, and spends the same time at rated speed. Yep, so right, our conclusions was basically Williston, right, in North Dakota in general, it does provide an area with optimal wind resource, just because of the low biodiversity impact, and just because it is a fairly remote, primarily industrial area, right, that's flat and elevated, so there are higher wind speeds, and that wind is nearly constant. And then as far as our study goes, right, the limiting factor that we found was really just the cutoff speed of the turbine, right? And so if we were to delve deeper, we would probably just study larger turbines. Obviously, we would need to look at other factors that would affect, like the actual construction cost of the turbine, and then, right, what the actual effect of the hub height and temperature and things like that were. But preliminarily, our findings were that, right, the larger turbine that you can get in this area, since the wind speed is constant and it is so high, is that the larger turbines will be a better suit for that application. Are there any questions?
Okay, so is that looks like, is that really that high? The wind speed in North Dakota, looks like a very aggressive wind. Where do you get the data here?
So it's from the Visual Crossing database, right? And they have, it's literally hourly breakdowns of historic wind speed.
Wow, this is really something here. There's very productive region there. Is you work for utility companies, right? Is that related to your work?
So this specifically isn't related to my work. So I work at an RTO. I work at Southwest Power Pool.
Yeah,
And I do like engineering adjacent to operations. So I do like reliability studies and things like that.
right.
But this is an area that just keeps popping up because it's constantly constrained because of the transmission and generation limiting.
Yeah, for a while there has been discussion about bringing this power from North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, go down to Southern California, the load center. I don't know whether it's realized or with we have a lot of electric vehicles in the future. I wonder whether, the calculations might be now that you have potential energy sink. And I
Mhm.
wonder whether, California is the right place, to move the electron, the transmission. Is there any other place that we can somehow utilize the electric vehicle, charging, and how big it's going to be, that will be some kind of interesting. But this is
Right.
a very interesting work. And when you said that this place is keep popping up, what do you see at your work actually? What kind of warning or red flags that you see? Do you?
Um,
Yeah.
so the operations center, right, they're constantly running reliability studies in real time and doing like N-1, like if this line goes out, what's going to happen, type studies like throughout the day. And this is just an area that's always coming up because those lines are always, um, close to their limit, just because of all that transmission, all that generation that's coming up, into that load pocket. And then right on the planning side, there's handfuls of people that are trying to connect. But the limiting factor is whether the transmission grid can handle it, right? So people want to provide the generation. It's the limiting factor is the transmission, right? And so the closer that you can build um to the load center, the better.
Yeah, you go to the next one, slide number 16. Uh, yeah, so the time in curve, where's the time above cutout? You have a number 18, slide number 18, 2 slides down below.
Yep.
Right. So you got a significant number of hour producing wind speed there, the blue one, the blue band there. So what is that, approximately about 1,000 or 2,000 hours, right?
Time above cutoff speed
Yeah,
when it's
right.
yeah, it's about, I think it was about 1,000, between 1,000 and 1,500 hours.
Right. So that's quite significant. But on the other hand, you probably reach the limit, below that hours, right? Between hours, 5,500 to 7,000, that's when you probably have issues. When the transmission constraint, you can start seeing transmission constraint. Then another option probably, if for the time being, if you can handle it, maybe a conversion to hydrogen could be a temporary solutions, you
All
know.
right.
But if you grow, larger wind farms, or higher wind penetrations in that regions, the only way probably transmissions, right? So
Mhm.
what is your takeaway from your project here? What did you learn? What is the most important takeaway from your project here?
Um, so I think what was surprising to me was just how much wind power was available. Like I didn't think that the cutoff speed for a turbine would really be what is stopping it from really just producing power every day. Um, and then right, just highlighting again, um, the need for more renewable energy, right? Because it seems like all of the coal plants and a lot of the conventional resources are getting close to the end of their lifetime, right? On top of all of the financial and political incentives that there are to shift to renewable energy.
Yeah. So are there any hydro nearby? Uh, you know, Montana, is that far away? And I don't know, if there
Um,
is any potential hydro storage that you might be able to employ.
yeah, Montana was one state over, and then all of that. I mean, if you go back to not that one, this one. Um, I mean, there's a couple of. I mean, I guess you could investigate like what is available out of this
Yeah, there's a long
body
one.
of water.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Very interesting project here. And I'm glad that you can see the connection with your own work now.
Mhm.
You realize about transmission constraint and mostly they don't want to take any risk, right?
Right.
Of exceeding the transmission constraint. Anyway, is there any other questions for Rick here from the students? Okay, if not, then we are going to the next one. Let me see. Next one will be Ethan, right? Is Ethan here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me see. Can I assign you, make co-host? Okay. Now you should be able to share your screen now.
Yeah, let me see. Hmm. Share. There we go. Let me pull y'all back over here.
Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and get started then. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Hughes. I'm the grad student leader of Team 5. I'm actually an undergrad taking this class with dual credit for graduate and undergraduate credit. And yeah, our project was just a photovoltaic power generation system design. So we decided to basically build a hypothetical solar generation facility outside of Auburn, Alabama. And I guess I'll talk through a little bit of that today. So, oops, there you go. So yeah, starting out, just a quick introduction to photovoltaic power. So photovoltaics produce electric current through light shining on a PN junction. So kind of, you remember from digital electronics, you have a positive and a negatively charged substrates, and in certain arrangement, you shine light on it, it can create electrical current. So we use this principle in solar arrays to generate electricity, which then can be used to tie into the grid, power remote locations, variety of uses anywhere you need electric power. So for our purposes, we're going to design a grid tie solar generation facility. So the first step in that is determining where you want to build this thing. So for us, we want to kind of stay local to Auburn just to see how it benefit our area. So we found this location here outside of Opelika. It's down towards the Beauregard areas, just about 30 minutes south of Auburn, Opelika area. It's 22 acres. It stayed within our price per acre limit of $10,000 to $15,000 an acre to maintain profitability. This particular location is already cleared. It has a lot of pasture land on it. Doesn't require a lot of more deforestation to construct the site. It's very flat terrain. Has a nearby creek that we will retain as standing woods to protect our water resources. But because it's cleared and a lot of the neighboring property is also cleared, we don't have to worry about shading from trees, which is very common in the Southeast. So after we decided that this site, we could go ahead and move forward with the solar energy system design. So for our purposes, we found the software Helioscope to be very, very beneficial. So the Helioscope software is a professional engineering software designed just for designing PV generation facilities, and it's very expensive software. It's a few $1,000s a year for licensing, but luckily they provide a 1 or 2 week free trial for students or prospective clients, or anybody who may be interested in using the software. So we were able to use that through the design portion of our project. And it enabled us to have an all-in-one resource for mechanical design, electrical design, economic analysis, and generation analysis. And so through using that, we were able to come up with this physical array layout you can see in the photo on the screen. If the property lines aren't overlaid on the image, but if I scroll back to the last slide, you can see how the property kind of sits diagonally. It's not straight north, south, east, west. So we've oriented our rows to be parallel to that southern property boundary, and that enables us to have more efficient use of the land, fewer areas taken up with, road structures for service and, whatnot. So after designing the actual layout, we decided to go with the Canadian Solar CS6U 345M panels and Sunny Tri-Power 2400 TLUS inverters. These components were selected because those companies have pretty good reputations. They seem to stand behind their products. These products have pretty good expected service lives of about 25-ish years, which is pretty good for this type of project. For equipment, we pretty much just selected the inverters and panels in this project. The grid tie equipment, such as, breakers and protection equipment, isn't part of our project because that would require more input from the utility, which, us building this hypothetical design really just wasn't feasible. So in our design, we ended up designing, tilt angle, geographical arrangement, the layout of the panels and inverter location, as well as what kind of site grading would be needed. And there again, that Helioscope software provided just an easy way to track all of that, as well as, overlaid over satellite imagery and whatnot. So yeah, moving forward, after we got our design done, we could start modeling the generation of the system in order to determine if it's even economically possible. So the first step in that is mathematical modeling. So as I mentioned before, the software provided a feature where you could input, your expected losses due to shading. You could input topographical information about the terrain, and it would determine, how that would affect shading. It has a huge database of annual irradiance and monthly irradiance for the location. So through plugging in all that information, we were able to determine that the monthly generation, as expected, would have a peak in July of around 617 megawatt hours, and a minimum generation in December, there again, as expected, for our area with 461 megawatt hours. There again, as I mentioned before, the shading analysis allowed us to determine our optimum row spacing, where we'd have the most square footage of the property, covered in panels, while also not shading every row with the row in front of it. So through this, we determined that this facility, it actually generates significantly more energy than I was expecting. So you can kind of see overall our energy to grid for the year is nearly 7 megawatt hours, I believe. Yeah. So I think I have that 7 gigawatt hours, I think is the magnitude there. So yeah, it's a pretty impressive generation for this size facility, at least from the other examples I was seeing. It appears that way. So then moving forward from that, we were able to perform an economic analysis, determine if it's construction of this facility is financially feasible. So as I mentioned before, we pretty much just spec'd out the panels, the wiring, and the inverters and connectors and that kind of stuff for there at the site. We weren't able to price any of the grid tie equipment, which would drive up the price a little more. But for the equipment, construction, everything that we anticipate, on the backside of the project is around 12.4 million, which sounds like a lot, but for this size facility, that's actually pretty affordable. The project, has a payback period of 8.2 years with that, whenever you account for its expected revenue, which is pretty good, especially when you consider the project is going to be in service for at least 25 years, expected life of 25 years. We can probably go a little past that with some extra maintenance. And during that time, when you account for the time value of money, the owner will realize nearly a 200% return on investment. If you count just sheer dollar amounts, we're way beyond that. It's nearly $30 million of return on investment. And that leaves us with an internal rate of return of over 11%, which seems to be, from my research, pretty high compared to a lot of renewable energy construction facility or renewable energy generation facilities. Whenever companies are looking at whether it's economically profitable or not, an IRR of over 11 is usually pretty attractive. So with this being the whole goal of this project to be reducing environmental footprint, providing a more green energy source. After we've determined, yes, this is a viable project, it's economically feasible, we have a good design, our preliminary design. Next step was determining how this will affect the environmental footprint of energy in the area. So because the land's already cleared, we don't have a huge deforestation impact or impact upon local wildlife, that kind of stuff. So that was attractive. Again, we're sourcing materials that can be constructed locally, and thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transport. One of the big concerns about a PV system is that the rare earth minerals required to construct these panels are really non-environmentally friendly to mine and to extract. So we're planning on recycling everything at the end of the life of the project, which there again, that's providing more money back to the project, making future solar panels cheaper and reducing our environmental footprint even further. Overall, you can see from this graph, I think this is from the NREL website. This graph is actually referenced in our environmental impact assessment document that we have developed, I believe. And you can see that photovoltaics are down there at the left-hand side compared to natural gas and coal towards the right of the image. You can see just how much more environmentally friendly greenhouse gas emissions wise this project would be over what our common natural gas generation in the state of Alabama. So finally, after we've determined it's economically feasible and environmentally friendly, regulatory compliance and permitting is the next big hurdle. So there again, we could only do so much with this, with it being a hypothetical construction, because we could look and see what regulations were available to be seen online, but some of the stuff is more regulated by utility companies, and they don't really like sharing some of that information unless you are actually constructing the site, because it's more of a security thing as well as business operations. They just don't like giving out information, just who knows who. So we determined that city and county regulations allowed for this generation facility. However, federal and state, we're still a little unsure. Federally, we would have to apply for permits through like FERC and other organizations or regulatory bodies. And to do that, we would need approved engineering drawings, which this is an example of here to the right. This is a single line diagram showing all of our wiring from the panels to combiners to inverters. There again, it kind of ends there where we would put a substation tying it onto the grid, because for our purposes, we did not account for that portion of the design. But yeah, I think overall, I definitely learned a lot about how these facilities are built, as well as how they can be economically profitable. I hope all of our undergrads, it seemed like to me like everybody had a pretty good experience working on this project, and I think it served us very well. So I guess that's pretty much everything I have. I'll open up to questions now.
Any questions from the audience? So Ethan, I have questions about this. Looks like you have about 6 students.
Yes, sir. I think it was 6 students, if I'm not mistaken.
So you were you able to get collaborations from your students?
Yes, sir. I was. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get everybody together in person at one time.
Yeah.
During the semester, just everybody's schedules. However, I did create some assignments that were, pretty brief but allowed, students to perform their own research as well as contribute to the final project or final report. And yeah, I think everybody contributed to that, and I was really happy with the way all the students worked together on that.
So what do you recommend? What is, I want to sort of like give you, get you recommendations on how can we make sure that, the group can be as cohesive like yours and everybody's willing to chip in, and, what is the best strategy, for the future groups?
I don't know. I think the way I approached it was kind of giving guidance while also leaving it open-ended, because this is a research project was the way I understood it. And I wanted everybody to be able to perform their own research while also having a goal with that research, instead of just go out, here's the project, contribute something. So I developed some kind of specific things I wanted everybody to work on, gave a guide for kind of how I would evaluate that whenever I was determining grades. But yeah, I think I really don't think it's anything, specifically I did. I think I just had a good group that worked well together.
Yeah. So do they contribute to presentation or report or both?
More towards the report, and then I kind of built the presentation off of the report. So the way I structured everybody's assignments is there were coincidentally about 6 major sections to the report that I wanted to cover. So I just pretty much gave everybody here, here's a section for you to contribute towards, and then use their research along with mine in building that section of the report, and then built the presentation based on our report.
So is this something that you already do in Southern Company, or this is something that are you in the planning or in operation?
I'm definitely not in planning. I have
Yeah.
worked in design and in applications. So I mainly work on the protection side of things
Yeah.
during my co-op rotations, and have worked in substation control design as well as protection control applications. Basic protective relaying and substation wiring is pretty much how I've done. So it's kind of related. The design portion definitely is, and that's kind of why I wanted to go that route on this. But as far as renewable planning, that's definitely a new thing for me.
I see. Okay. It's very good. Very good. So you're working from Auburn, or you have to go to Birmingham, where the headquarters in Birmingham, right?
It is, yeah. So I've worked for Southern Company Services, which is kind of the like engineering provider for Alabama Power and Mississippi Power. So anything that kind of spans opcos that they're not engineering inside themselves for Southern Company, SCS kind of takes it over. Our office is up in Birmingham, but my previous rotations I've worked remotely. I'm not sure what this summer is going to look like for me yet.
I see. Okay. There's no need for you to be there, and
Right.
you practically just work out of your computers.
Right. Yep. I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that. But I think they're kind of making a push towards in office work. So that's why I'm still waiting to hear back from my supervisor for this semester.
Yeah. It's very good. Very good. Yeah, this is a real example that everybody contribute to the project, and that's the purpose of this group project. So is there any other questions? So if this is the last day, I think for our group, we have only 5 projects. Let me see to make sure. Yesterday we got 3 persons, 3 presentations, and today we have 2. So I want to show everybody. Let me share my screen. So I want you to open up this presentations spreadsheet here. So everyone, including the graduate student and undergraduate students, see all students, right, must fill up this form. And you need to do it as soon as possible, and submit it through Canvas as homework. I think homework number 14, if I'm not mistaken. But at any rate, if possible, you have to fill up on the spreadsheet. It makes my life a lot easier that way. So please do it. And, this is the final presentations, and, hopefully that you can submit it, and I can quickly summarize all the score from the presentation at least, and then I'll work on the report. All right. Any comments or any questions? So if not, then I think I'll close this project presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye. I'll see you in the exam, all right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for taking my class, and hopefully you learn something out of it. And if you need any, advice on renewable energy work, perhaps that, send your resumes, perhaps I can send it out. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.